Let's bring in Hadas from Politco. She's a media correspondent for the magazine, and she joins us now on the telephone. Hadas, what can you tell us? What do you know?
So as far as we know, Roger Ailes passed away, it seems, this morning. He was 77 years old. He had been battling some health problems for some time, so this wasn't any sort of sudden death, but it obviously is a really stunning sort of cap to the past, not even year. I mean, it was just a little less than a year ago that Roger Ailes resigned from the network, and to have this sort of be the end of that story, it's really fascinating to think of what this situation would be like had he stayed at Fox News. It's still clearly affecting the network. I watched the anchors read it on air, and they were getting choked up. So despite all of the controversy that surrounded Roger Ailes, he still had a lot of people who are still loyal to him, who owe their careers to him. So it's a very sort of mixed legacy for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, and Hadas, that's an important point, which is that there will be many people who will look at how his career ended in the sense that it ended under a cloud of shame, and for many people, what some would agree are terrible allegations of sexual harassment, but just set the context for us of how groundbreaking this individual was when it came to the world of cable news television.
Right. Well, when he started, when Rupert Murdoch brought Roger Ailes in to start Fox News in 1996, people sort of laughed at the idea that anybody could take on the big broadcast networks, and anybody could really take on the CNNs or anything like that, and also the point of view from which they were reporting on, that nobody really took it seriously, and clearly they were wrong, and it very quickly became sort of this powerhouse ratings that it still continues to be to this day, and it not just the ratings, but it has a really profound effect on politics. It seems as though if you want to be any sort of Republican candidate, you have to go through Fox News, you have to pass the Fox News test, and oftentimes it's sort of a clearinghouse both before and after politicians run. You'll often see Republican candidates or former Republican members of Congress going to Fox News after their time in politics ends. We've seen plenty of candidates go through as contributors or even as hosts at some different times. And we see that profound effect also. Some people were comparing, for example, the recent election in France. Some people were pointing out that there's no Fox News there and wondering if that had somehow affected the outcome of that election. The network, it's hard to find a network whose brand has had such a lasting effect on politics, on the media landscape, and has such a loyal fan base. And it's been, through all the changes that they've had, every time I talk to analysts, they say, listen, it's the Fox News brand, plus so maybe the specific anchor, yes, they matter, but the brand is so strong, you could put most any anchor in there, and they will still have good ratings.
Yeah, though I think the brand was heavily identified with him when people talk about the growth of Fox News. Though there are many high-profile hosts like Bill O'Reilly, really it seemed to be a manifestation of Roger Ailes and his design.
Right. I mean, he was definitely the figurehead of the entire organization, both internally and externally. Everything went through him, and that's partly what caused some of their problems in terms of not having a dual reporting structure to report some of these issues that were happening. And it was definitely, it was just a kind of a one-man show at the end of the day. I mean, he really ran his own fiefdom. There was very little control from 21st Century Fox management. He was allowed to just do his own thing because he was so successful at it. And everything ran through him. Every time you would talk to anchors, they always credited Roger for their success, for what they did. And actually, when you looked at some of the anchors who kind of clashed with the network, one of them, for example, Glenn Beck, part of that was that he was already sort of successful in his own right. He didn't owe his success necessarily to Roger Ailes, and that's where some of the sort of personality clashes came from. He engendered really fierce loyalty among people, and clearly there were some negative things that came out of his conduct while running the network, and part of the reason that those stayed under the radar for so long was just because he was such a powerful force that it took quite a while for any of that for any of those stories to really come to light.
You know, and it's interesting, Hadas. You know, President Donald Trump has been very vocal and very upfront in defining his relationship with Roger Ailes
and defending
Roger Ailes.
Yeah.
And this is something. I mean, no matter how you feel about Roger Ailes and some of the things that it's alleged that he has done, this was a man who understood what people wanted to see on their television screens. And this goes back to 1968 when he was advising Richard Nixon. We all remember, well, we don't remember, but we do know that in 1960, during the presidential campaigns with John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, Nixon performed horribly on the debate stage with President Kennedy. And Roger Ailes saw that, and in 1968, he began to advise Richard Nixon on how to work the camera.
Yeah.
And that is something that many people who know Roger Ailes will say, that he had a very keen understanding of what looked good on television. And that is what he presented. It wasn't just the news. There was something more to the news. It was the type of people that he chose to put on the air, the type of folks that who had very strong voices and very strong opinions that he wanted to put on the air. Truly groundbreaking, Hadas.
And I mean, it was, and he was famous for just knowing the look of how things should go. And he would watch there are similarities to the president and how they would watch the television without the sound on and just look at the visuals. And Roger was sort of famous for saying that if you weren't interested in what you were seeing without the sound on, nobody would keep watching, nobody would turn the sound back on. And so that's why the graphics, the way they look, the way the ladies looked, the way the men looked, how they dressed, was all very, very important, including everything from camera angles and the, you know, infamous shots of the female anchor legs and, you know, following Megyn Kelly down the hallway to go figure out who won the 2012 election. That was very much his, and he was known for being somebody who was involved in all of the details. He would sit in the control room and sometimes call specific shows and, you know, just out of the blue and say, hey, I don't like the way this graphic looks or this video, don't use this video again. And, you know, this is the guy running the entire network, and he would be that involved in the minute-by-minute what was happening at on every show.
Yeah. You mentioned, well, I was going to say that you mentioned that a lot of Republican politicians sort of had to go through Fox News, and it's been argued that it was Fox News that really legitimized Donald Trump as a candidate. You know, sort of before Fox News fully got on board, there were many candidates. He was clearly an outsider, and perhaps, you know, many people would not have taken him seriously because he had sort of teased the public about running for president before. But Fox News made him the real deal.
Well, Fox, I mean, even before he announced his candidacy, Donald Trump had a regular call-in time with Fox and Friends every single week. So he was already very familiar to the Fox audience and was a regular presence there as well. And you're right that initially, at least when you looked at somebody like Rupert Murdoch, and there were some bumps in the road between Roger Ailes and Donald Trump's relationship, especially when Donald Trump pulled out of a debate. Ultimately, though, I think especially on the opinion side of Fox News, they recognized that Donald Trump was this sort of phenomenon that they either needed to get on board with, otherwise they would lose a lot of the audience. They would find it elsewhere. And now we see, as of we're dealing with right now, we kind of see an interesting dichotomy between the opinion side of Fox News, which is still, for the most part, pro-Donald Trump, and then the news side of Fox News, which is reporting on all of these intense bombshells that are coming out. We see sometimes some interactions between the news side and the opinion side, which have led to some interesting moments, for example, between Chris Wallace and the host of the morning show Fox and Friends, where Chris Wallace is saying, no, this isn't just some witch hunt, this is a big story. And the Fox and Friends host is saying, oh, no, we think this is, you know, not as big of a deal as it turns out to be. But that's part of sort of the genius of what Roger Ailes built, because he did bring on legitimate news journalists and then paired them with these opinionated hosts, which would bring in a lot of ratings.
Right. And, you know, look, he was a polarizing figure to people who were Democrats, to those on the left. He was a puppet master. He was somebody who used the Fox News channel to espouse his own personal politics. He would take stories that were minor in nature and blow them up on Fox News, where over and over, hour after hour after hour, the anchors and the pundits and the commentary folks would hammer that story home. To Republicans, to those politicians who were members of the GOP, he provided an outlet for them, an outlet where they could talk to their supporters directly, somebody who was a counterweight to what many GOP members felt was a left-leaning news industry. And what's interesting is that for a lot of people, he represented a reactionary view of America today. He once told a biographer that he wanted America to revert back to its best self, which he thought, in his mind, was 1955 in the Midwest.
Make America great again?
Right. I mean, his ideal America was 1955 in the Midwest, which for some Americans was probably a wonderful time.
Right.
But for a lot of Americans, not the best time in the world.
No.
Right. I mean, and you saw that also in a lot of the stories and the way they were covered by Fox News, sort of family values, and the way that even, how the women and men were presented. There used to be sort of this infamous pants ban where women weren't supposed to wear pants on air, both for the aesthetic and also just, the classic female look. Apparently that has now changed since Roger has left. But there was, it was a very, you watched Fox News and it was something different than you were seeing elsewhere on television, and that's part of the reason why they had such a loyal audience as they did.
And, we talked a little bit about the impact that he had on this most recent election, a little bit about him and Nixon, but he was also pretty influential with the George W. Bush campaign and election as well, kind of as sort of taking aim at Bush's opposition, really.
Right. I mean, it was really fascinating to believe that you couldn't be a Republican candidate for president. You couldn't be a Republican president in the last 20 or so years without dealing with Roger Ailes, without dealing with Fox News. It's not clear how that's going to change from here on out, because Fox is still a pretty big juggernaut and they still matter a lot. Without having Ailes, though, and Rupert Murdoch is a different person who's running Fox News, and now there's talk that they are looking for a new head of the network to come in. How is that going to change the future of Republican politics without having this sort of these in reality sort of gatekeepers?
Yeah, Hadas, you are well versed in the media landscape. Let's talk a little bit about that in the discussion around the legacy of Roger Ailes. In how you've seen Fox News Channel in the weeks and months after Roger Ailes was forced out, is it that the model that he set up for Fox News is such a well-oiled machine that it does not matter who you have? Certainly the network minted stars, the Bill O'Reillys and the Megyn Kellys and the Sean Hannitys of the world. But since Bill O'Reilly has left, since Megyn Kelly has left, they've put other people into those time slots, and they are flourishing.
They're still getting the ratings.
They are still getting the ratings. In some cases, they're doing better than the folks that were in those spots before them. So is it that this channel, this behemoth, this juggernaut that Roger Ailes created is simply going to continue rolling on its own, or are we starting to see perhaps the weakening of Fox News, especially as we now see MSNBC, for example, is ascendant?
Right. So there is a sense that Roger definitely built such a machine that it can run without him, and there's a clear model for him. And as we've seen with the departure of people like Bill O'Reilly, with the departure of people like Megyn Kelly, they can still get the ratings and they'll still easily beat the other networks. But you're right that MSNBC, especially recently, has really started to ascend in the ratings. We're seeing sort of this ratings war, and you have to understand that for the longest time, the Fox News ratings were just so far beyond the other two networks that even getting within striking distance is considered a victory for the other networks. And so what's happening now, especially in the advertising demographic, which is between the ages of some people use 18 to 49 or 25 to 54, that's where those are the people that the advertisers care about. The average Fox News viewer is very old, and it's the oldest amongst the cable channels. And what we're seeing is that it not only sometimes in overall ratings, but also in this demo, that the other networks are really starting to beat Fox News, and that's a really important factor because that's where the money comes from, the advertisers. And it's true to an effect that you could put anybody in, and that's what the analysts are still believe. The people who are picking stocks and things like that, and who look at the market and they say, listen, the Fox brand is the Fox brand. Where is the audience going to go if they don't watch Fox? If you're a conservative-leaning supporter of Donald Trump, and you have your basic cable and your television, where else can you go to watch something that you feel fits in with your views? And But what we're seeing, though, is with this change in the primetime lineup, with the loss of some of these really big personalities, really the only one left is Sean Hannity, who's kind of from the old guard of the primetime lineup, is they are understanding there is going to be a slight weakening. Actually, in their recent one of their recent financial disclosures, the 10Qs, they mentioned that to their investors. They say, we have changed the primetime lineup. We do expect a slight weakening in the ratings. So they are prepared for that. And also, I mean, the whole industry is changing. And at some point, it's not as though Fox will be immune to the change in the digital industry, to the cable cutters and the like.
All right, Hadas Gold, I know you probably have a very, very busy day ahead of you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, sharing your thoughts on the breaking news that the former CEO of Fox News Channel, Roger Ailes, has died at age 77.